Yep. So next up we have Saumya and Prashanth. So Saumya is a product manager and a retail specialist from ThoughtWorks, and Prashanth is also a product manager from ThoughtWorks, and he has been focusing on the Southeast Asia market to scale and go to market faster. So today they are going to talk about the connected ecosystem and the rise of the connected ecosystem and what you should be knowing about it. So over to you, Prashanth and Saumya.
Thanks, Muthu.
Thank you.
Really great sessions from Subodh and Teja, and I think a very good segue into our topic of the rise of connected ecosystems, on seeing how you can know your customers and use mindfulness and decisive decision making to be able to scale your business, really, right? So I'll just share my screen now. Cool. So good evening, everyone. Prashanth and I are going to talk about the rise of connected ecosystems today. Seems like quite a heavy topic, right? Like something like the rise of the planet of apes or something like that. But trust me, it's even bigger. So let's dive right into it.
Thanks, Saumya. Thanks, Muthu, for the introduction. So the rise of the connected ecosystem sounds like a very powerful statement, like Saumya said. The truth is not very far away from it either. Let's dive into it deeper to find out what an ecosystem is exactly. We found a couple of definitions online to help this cause. A natural ecosystem is defined as a community of living beings interacting with the physical environment and other non-living components. It can also be defined as the chain of interaction between the living organisms and their environment. So this is a natural occurring ecosystem, and we drew parallels to our business technology ecosystem as well, where the definition would look something like, a community of organizations and consumers interacting within a digital and physical environment. Also the chain of interactions between different parties of community over a connected network. And our observations over the next 30 minutes will show as to what's been happening with different companies the last few years, and how everyone's heading towards that connected ecosystem. And for example, to explain that further, let's take an example of an ecosystem like Google, right? So you would wake up in the morning, let's say to a sound of alarm by your Google Home, and then getting ready to work, and then you would probably check your traffic status on Google Maps and then navigate using Google Maps as well. You would listen to songs on Google Play, then check emails, and work on the Google Suite, and search for a definition of ecosystem like we did on Google as well. So all of this is happening on one particular platform, or Google is offering all of this in its ecosystem. And that's what we want to talk about, how everyone's heading towards these sort of connected spaces.
So let's talk a little bit about like what is really causing this move towards the connected ecosystem. I want to take you through the reality, really. So truth be told, there are basically two key elements to this whole story over here. One is your customer, who is looking for convenience, efficiency, and value. And the other one are businesses who used to be unicorns or traditional businesses before, are now wanting to sustain and grow, right? To continue remaining in the game, really. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have really heard of this, but there's this concept of the Amazon flywheel, which was coined by Jeff Bezos. It's basically this virtuous cycle that leverages, customer experience to drive traffic to the platform and sellers, and in turn, in fact, attract sellers with a wider range of products on Amazon, thereby serving a better experience to the customer. So basically, they feed each other. And this is almost a synonymous, synonymous to that flywheel, but at a much bigger scale. And we'll see how, right? So let's take a look at some examples. Now, well, I'm sure most of you already know, Kim Kardashian. And for all those who weren't really paying attention to our talk until now, I'm hoping you are paying attention now with that name. So apart from really being a social influencer, how many of you really know that she's also an entrepreneur? She has a line of beauty and fashion products that she sells. And, you know, a few years ago, she really wanted to enter the China market. Now, let's see what all she would have had to set up in order to really enter and grow into this market. She would have had to build a fan following. Not such a big deal for Kim, but well, for smaller social influencers, it's a much bigger deal for a newer market. Having some sort of an interface to be able to interact, transact, and serve her customers, she would have had to set up some manufacturing factories to be able to create her products, manufacture her products, which she can sell to her customers. And of course, coming up with some sort of, you know, shipping and delivery mechanism to be able to deliver those products to her customer. And this is quite overwhelming, right? But this is just not it for a business to really run. There's much more to that. And I'm sure entrepreneurs in this you know, session will know about that. So what did Kim really do? So she chose to leverage Alibaba, not only to save money, but a lot of her time to enter the China market. Now, Alibaba comes with this vision of making it easy to do business. So they were actually able to achieve this by providing different services to Kim to be able to do all of those things that she would have had to set up on her own. And interestingly, you know, many of these services are actually businesses that Alibaba supports in a similar manner that they are supporting Kim today. So what really made this an ecosystem, right? It's the connectedness of each of these systems with each other that built this as a network of an ecosystem. And they also share their data across this entire ecosystem. So this was the crux of what Alibaba did for Kim, and almost equivalent to thousands of other social entrepreneurs. Now, what really makes the core of this ecosystem? So there are basically four building blocks that are there. There is this network coordination. Well, IPL, or rather PLF, actually gave us this you know, opportunity to use our network to be able to talk in this session today. And you can see the you know, wonders that network coordination can do. The other thing that Alibaba did was the data intelligence, to be able to really optimize and bring efficiency to the businesses. And the third thing is building for scale. Now, I hope you remember the flywheel I spoke of you know, a few slides back. The more businesses you have on board, the better network effect you can get, the better data you can have, and therefore you will get more businesses into your system. So basically, to build for scale to hundreds and thousands of businesses is what Alibaba built this foundation on. And I really cannot emphasize more. All of this is useful only if you have like minimal manual intervention, letting the businesses and individuals to actually focus on what really matters to them and leaving the rest for the automated world to do for them. And that's how basically Alibaba came up with its different 40 businesses that, you know, pun intended. So they basically started off with the core use case of e-commerce, built support systems around it like payment, logistics, you know, the cloud infrastructure, marketing, and all of that. And then they started to diversify to scale their businesses. Now, all this while, we've looked at Alibaba from where the customer is the business here. They also have obviously the end user also as the consumer also as their customer. But I want to take a different example for that. Let's look at the day in the life of a corporate. No, it's not as simple as this line looks. It's a lot more than what happens. But just imagine, you know, in the COVID times that we are in today, if you didn't really have these digital solutions to keep us entertained, to get us groceries at the tap of a button, to be able to make payment without really getting in contact with somebody, would we really have survived this lockdown with as much sanity as we are doing right now? I really doubt that would be the case, right? And whether you realize it or not, Amazon has actually led this way into the entire digital ecosystem that has been built around us and to almost all part of our lives, in fact. Well, please don't suddenly start screaming. Uber is obviously not there with Amazon, and neither does Amazon have an equivalent of Uber, but really nothing really stops them from getting into that place also, as long as it's bringing convenience to their customers. All right. So now Amazon has built this ecosystem on those 4 building blocks that I had spoken of for Alibaba also. Plus, they've been using their flywheel strategy. There's one key thing that they've done, which is blurring the lines between physical and digital. Even Alibaba has done that, but given that we're talking about Amazon, let's take a look at how they've done that. Now, how many of you know or even experienced Amazon Go? I'm sure you will appreciate it more than ever with the social distancing becoming the new normal. Now, it's basically an unmanned store where you walk in, pick up what you want, and just leave. The items you pick up really get added to your digital card automatically, and the money gets deducted once you leave the store. Now, all you have to do is scan in while entering in the store so that the store knows that who you are digitally. That's all. Now, Amazon is basically known for being disruptors, you know. Just when retailers started focusing on their online channel because of Amazon leading the way, Amazon dropped a bomb on them of the Amazon Go concept. Now, it's still in an experimental phase, but at least they were able to showcase what stores can also be digitally equipped to another level altogether. But how did they really do it? It's very simple. They focused on eliminating the customer's biggest pain, and that was standing in those long billing queues. They know that everyone carries a mobile these days, so why not make the best use of this technology by integrating it with your store ecosystem? They have done this in an experimental way because, well, this is an uncharted territory and everybody would be looking to experiment in the area, right? The best piece in all of this is the fact that it's given them this unified customer view, not only in the digital space, but also in the physical space now. So they know how your customers shop in a physical store too. Look at the possibilities that this really opens up for Amazon, right? And just like that, we have Amazon creating that ecosystem for us with so many, their own businesses that they have, plus some of the mergers and acquisitions that they've done. Now, while until now, we have been speaking of, physical and digital solutions that are building ecosystems, let's take a look at how one app can really build a world around you.
Thanks, Saumya. And yeah, jumping on to super apps. Super app has been a buzzword the last couple of years. And the definition that I really liked for super app is it's an operating system for your everyday life. And let's jump into an example quickly to understand what is a super app and how does it work and what problems does it solve. Let's take Go-Jek as an example here because they have succeeded fairly well in this space. So let's take a look into a day in the life of a persona like a digital marketer in Jakarta city, Indonesia, using the Go-Jek app. So every morning, the person would open up the Go-Jek app, wants to commute to work. At 9 a.m. would use either the Go Ride two-wheeler service or the four-wheeler taxi service. 10:30 would use the Go Shop application to order groceries, and at 12 would order food to be delivered to the office or home using the Go Food application. And if you want to see a movie, the person would go to GoTix service and order movie tickets as well. And all of these services paid for by Go-Jek's own GoPay application. So it is truly a connected ecosystem what Go-Jek has built right now, but it didn't start off this way. And we'll go as to how they started and how did they build such a successful ecosystem in Indonesia. So where did they start from? So in 2010 is when Go-Jek started. So they saw very nice opportunity in Jakarta city, Indonesia, which is very infamous for its traffic and its highly densely populated cities. One of the most preferred ways of commuting in these cities were on two-wheeler taxis. And how they operated was these taxis were all around the street corners where one person who needed to go somewhere would navigate to the traffic, find a two-wheeler taxi, negotiate a price, and then hop on and go to the destination. So Go-Jek thought they could bring in some amount of convenience to this whole experience of hailing a ride. So they started as a call center in 2010, where if I needed a ride, I would call up a particular number, tell them I'm at so-and-so place, I want to go to my destination, and Go-Jek would in turn call its fleet of drivers, fix a price and let the customer know. And they did this for a good 4 to 5 years almost. And Go-Jek, inspired by Uber and the likes in the West, launched a ride-sharing app as a smartphone app in 2015. And that's how their super app journey started. So what did Go-Jek actually do that made them such a success? So in 2015, they launched the Android and iPhone app. And in order to achieve scale, they wanted to try different things. So they realized in peak hours of traffic, for example, it might be 8 to 10 a.m. and 4 to 7 p.m. at night, they were doing really well and fairly well. But apart from these rush hour traffic, they were not. So they realized that they have to keep the drivers motivated and more services on offer. So they introduced a couple of new services called Go Send, which is delivery of packages, very Dunzo equivalent, and Go Food, which is a food delivery app. To keep the drivers motivated, as well as bringing a lot of transactions onto the Go-Jek platform. And in 2016, they launched a couple of support services, one called GoPay and the other called GoPoints. They realized that in Indonesia, 65% of the people did not have bank accounts. And they saw this as an opportunity. And also, simultaneously, all the operations that were happening on the app, let's say like booking a ride, tracking a ride, all were happening online, but the payment was obviously in cash. And they saw this as a gap that they could bridge, and they launched GoPay as their digital wallet transaction service. And they launched GoPoints as a loyalty program initially, and then later evolved into a retention, rewards platform for merchants and consumers as well. So if, let's say, a merchant had a free product to advertise, they would come onto this platform, GoPoints platform, because it had a large audience. And then every time you made a transaction on Go-Jek app, on its services, you would earn a certain number of points, and you would redeem these points for a particular service or a product that's available on points. So it became an ecosystem, and it evolved into an ecosystem right away because payment was there, and a retention service was there as well. And then from then on, they went into a bunch of different services. They have I think more than 20 or 30 different services right now. A lot of them keep coming in, going away. They experiment with a lot of new services, but there are definitely about 20 services that have a lot of traction in the last few years. A quick comparison between Go-Jek and Uber. Both started relatively at the same time, Go-Jek in 2010, Uber in 2009. Go-Jek right now has a plethora of services available for its consumers. Uber, a few. Ride-hailing being its bread and butter. They did eventually diversify into a few things like food delivery, which was active even in India till a few months back, micromobility in cities like Singapore and New York, public transport tickets, and they had an Uber card and a wallet service as well. But a lot of them lost traction. They sold their entire operations in Southeast Asia market because they couldn't gain traction there. They sold their food delivery business in India as well. Ironically, Go-Jek launched a smartphone app inspired by Uber, saying that they wanted to be the Uber of Indonesia in 2015. And recently it's heard that Uber CEO said that they want to be a super app like Go-Jek. And the tables have definitely turned because Go-Jek has headed into that ecosystem that they want to be in, and Uber not so much yet. Another example to explain as to how an ecosystem has been working so far is WeChat. This is limited only in China right now. They started as a messaging application like WhatsApp, and eventually diversified into all services imaginable that can be available on a smartphone. One of their interesting applications is their mini programs, which is like a Play Store equivalent inside the WeChat application, which means it helps other people to develop apps within WeChat. So in true essence, it's definitely an operating system for everyday life in China, because I think it's going to evolve into an operating system itself at the pace which they're heading right now. So how can we build this connected ecosystem? So we spoke a lot about examples of what an ecosystem looks like, and we spoke about Amazon, we spoke about Go-Jek and WeChat. How can we head towards this? How can we keep in mind what is required to build a connected ecosystem? And we came up with a framework from our observations of these companies that we just saw, that Saumya and I spoke about. One thing that we struck out to us very evidently is all these companies that we spoke about operated with a mission, with a customer-centric and technology-driven approach. None of them would have been able to achieve what they did without this. And I think that's been common across all of these companies. So the first observation that we had, that all of these companies built a solid core use case, be it Amazon, selling books and they excelled at it, Go-Jek with ride hailing, or any other company, let's say even Swiggy right now with food delivery and branching off to multiple different things. So I think building that core use case, getting that cash flow in, building necessary infrastructure to sustain, helps them experiment and diversify into a lot of different things.
Yeah, and like a lot of unicorns have been going in that route until now, right? And as you are building your core use case, you would need to make it stronger and build support services around it. That would be the most important key to the whole thing. Now, this helps the businesses get a strong foothold in the area and can also become your competitive differentiators of sorts. We have examples of Amazon's Fulfillment by Amazon, AWS, Amazon warehouses. You also have Alibaba's Kya logistics. You have Go-Jek's GoPay. So how do you build those support systems for this core use case to become extremely strong as well as be your key differentiator? That's going to be one of the key things.
Yeah, and the third one is diversification. I think this stands out fairly evidently throughout all our examples. And like support services that Saumya has been talking about, they become their own, let's say something like a GoPay or Amazon Prime. They have their own audience, and they help in diversifying fairly quickly and efficiently. The main motivation for diversification comes from a point where companies start thinking, how can we do things differently? How can we stay relevant? How can I sustain in the longer term? So I think this is the sort of motivation that companies start thinking to diversify. And again, all of the companies that we spoke about, be it WeChat or Go-Jek or Amazon, or even Google for that matter. And I think we spoke about Apple earlier as well in the previous talk. So I think diversification is a very integral part of building that ecosystem, because the ecosystem wouldn't exist without multiple different services. It wouldn't be called an ecosystem at all.
Yeah. And as you diversify and kind of become stronger, it's also important to build some sort of, a strong loyalty system for retention and increase of adoption of your products and your services, right? And I mean, Amazon Prime is such a beautiful example for that. It's loyalty beyond just a point-based system, even Go points, for example. So keeping, how do you get innovative in keeping your customers loyal as well as allowing them to be your advocates? That's going to be one of the key things to look after.
And the last observation that we had was scaling and expansion of your products, services, etc. all of these companies have been able to scale and expand efficiently with obviously a few hiccups. But the intention was, how do we reach a larger audience? I think that was the intention as to how they scaled and expand. So in order to reach that level, they had to do it by targeting a new audience, new demographic, entering new channels, new markets, so to speak. So if Amazon had stuck to selling books only in America, they wouldn't have probably been successful all over the world today, right? So I think expanding and getting new folks onboarded on your platform or product is one of those key things that should be kept in mind.
Yeah, and yeah, Muthu, we're just wrapping up. Last 1 minute, and it's a circle, at the end of the day, because as you diversify, scale, expand the product and services that you come up with, that could become your core use case, and the cycle kind of repeats. So it's important to keep that in mind. And I mean, we've already spoken of this, so I'm not going to deep dive too much into it. A solid foundation and a solid culture is going to be important. And we've already spoken of what that foundation would look like. What should this culture look like? It's important to have that experimental mindset. And with that, we want to leave you with a thought, there is Cure.fit, there is Swiggy, there's Dunzo all around us. Do you think they are moving towards connected ecosystems today? Or should they start doing that? What's next for them? We would like to leave that thought with you all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Saumya and Prashanth. That was a very interesting presentation, and we have a lot of questions coming in as well. Let me take a couple from here. The first one is around, do you see a consolidation of these ecosystems in this future, more like a network of networks? What are your thoughts around that?
Yes, in fact, like that's also something Prashanth and I have spoken of. Like, what you actually see, what Alibaba is doing is that network of networks. So there are these standalone businesses that are probably having their little network within themselves, but bringing those, businesses together is something that, Alibaba has been doing, and nothing really prevents, Amazon and even Uber from partnering to actually build that, we saw the spoke wheel of Uber, which is smaller than Go-Jek. Nothing really prevents Amazon and Uber from partnering and making that bigger. So it will depend on what your strengths are and kind of bringing that together. And in fact, I had also written a blog sometime back on how Google can actually help retailers, come back in action post-COVID, the fashion retailers especially, and luxury retailers especially. And that is the connected ecosystem that they can build together to be able to help each other come back in action. And I think that's something we all should start thinking about. And we've seen right now, in fact, with COVID, how all countries have come together to help each other. So the point is, the more network you have, right, you can feed off each other much better.
Yeah, exactly. That's very interesting, rather, and many companies have already started also on the aspect of network of networks, right? So companies like Trivago, for example, what they could do today already is amazing. Thank you for your insight in there. Another question here is, what should a product manager keep in his mind? Let's say some of the elements that he has to take care of it today while he's building his small product today, as of today, so that later on it can emerge as this ecosystem of products or as a super app. So what are some of the elements to be taken care?
Yeah, so one of the behaviors I've noticed and personally as well experienced is to keep identifying problems to solve. It might sound as simple as that, but I think it's one of those things where you have to keep a lookout, be connected with your users, understand them better, like we were talking earlier, and find out those problems, identify those problems, so that those give birth to new ideas and new solutions that evolve itself into another service or product or anything of that sort on its own. So I think, to keep it simple, I would say identifying products, Not necessarily solving it right away, but yeah, just keep an eye out for it.
And at a higher level or at a mindset level, I would say always be visionary, think ahead, think of the future, but be experimental. Pick those smaller things, experiment, and you will be able to move on.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think what you had with your Go-Jek example was also quite amazing with the journey of the user and the problem that he faces at different points in time over the day, and each of that gives an opportunity. So looking out for problems and the related problems, I think is a great way to build the connected ecosystem around. Thank you, Saumya and Prashanth.